SEPP, or the 72T plan, is one of the ways that you can access retirement funds before age 59 and a half. It lets you take a calculated stream of payments from an IRA or other eligible retirement plan without the 10% additional tax. The trade-off, though, is rigidity. You don't receive permission to withdraw whatever you need. You're committing to a payment schedule that may last many years. Much like the ideal romance novel lead, SEPP has no fear of commitment. If you're new here, I'm Eric, and this channel covers topics related to approaching retirement that tend to cause confusion. Having retired myself a few years ago at 54, my goal is to cut through a lot of the incorrect information found online. Most retirement accounts are designed around age 59 and a half. Take money earlier, and you may face an additional 10% federal tax. The Rule of 55 provides one exception, but it's focused on accessing employer retirement plans, like the 401k. The SEPP, or 72T, is another option, and it's better for accessing IRAs. SEPP stands for Substantially Equal Periodic Payments, which is both accurate and a strong argument for using acronyms. We'll continue to use SEPP here. As usual, this video is informational and should not be considered financial advice. While typically used with an IRA, SEPP can apply to a qualified employer plan, but only after you separate from that employer. That makes SEPP broader than the Rule of 55 in some situations, especially if most of the early retiree's money is already in an IRA, or if the person is younger than 55. It's extremely important to know that the entire account gets locked into SEPP at the time you do it. If you have an IRA with $500,000 in it, consider carefully if you want the entire amount locked in for the duration. Making any unapproved change will result in an unexpected opportunity to correspond with the IRS, where they may impose a penalty on prior payments that receive the exception. Consider separating the amount used for SEPP from the rest of the IRA by moving just the money for SEPP into a new account. That way, one carefully structured decision does not take the entire account hostage. I make videos on topics related to decisions faced by people in the years leading up to and at retirement. If more of this type of content would be useful, consider subscribing to the channel. The SEPP payment amount is determined using one of 3 IRS-recognized methods, because, of course, one complicated way to determine the payment is insufficient. The formulas matter, but they're not the main reason SEPP deserves caution. Once you begin, this is not a withdrawal strategy you can casually revisit after watching a more persuasive YouTube video. The main issue is how long the commitment lasts. A SEPP must continue for at least 5 years or until you reach age 59 and a half, whichever comes later. Someone starting at 50 is therefore not making a 5-year commitment. That person is committing for roughly 9.5 years. By the time they're 55, the SEPP is 5 years old, but the commitment is for whichever comes later, 59 and a half or 5 years. The owner is therefore committed until they're 59 and a half. Now reverse the timing. Someone who begins at 58 reaches 59 and a half after about 18 months, but 5 years is later, so the schedule must continue until age 63. The rule prevents someone from starting payments before 59, say well before 59, taking a few payment-free distributions and then immediately stopping. There are 3 calculation methods, but for most cases, the difference between 2 of them makes them typically close enough not to really matter in a video on the essentials. The required minimum distribution method, RMD, recalculates the payment every year using a combination of the account balance and a life expectancy factor. The older you are at the time, the higher the life expectancy multiplier. On the other hand, the fixed amortization and fixed annuitization methods calculate a fixed annual payment using IRS rules, an approved interest rate range, and life expectancy assumptions. While the RMD method is fairly straightforward, there's more nuance in the other 2 that's outside the scope of this video. It's important to note, though, that the RMD method typically generates less income than the other 2 options. Let's look at some examples. Alice and Bob each have IRAs worth $100,000. We're going to look at how the options shake out at 2 different ages. Starting a SEPP at age 40 versus starting a SEPP at age 55. We'll also contrast the different options you have to choose from. If Alice is 40 years old, we see that if she chooses the RMD method, she'll start by receiving $1,712. But because RMD uses the value of the account, she'll have to run another calculation every year. If her account balance has gone up, so will the amount she must withdraw. If it goes down, so does the amount she must withdraw. Let's look at two different rates for a 40-year-old Alice. If she chooses the 2% option, she'll collect $2,918 annually while the SEPP is active. Unlike the RMD method, the amortization method is locked in unless Alice elects the one-time switch. Now look at amortization at 5%. At $5,307, it's almost twice the 2% value and 3 times the RMD amount. You can see that you do have options depending upon how big of a gap you need to cover. How does that compare to Bob at 55? Someone at 55 uses a different spot on the IRS lifetime table. With a shorter lifespan likely ahead of them, they need to withdraw more. If Bob chooses the RMD, he'll start with $2,294 annually, which he'll have to recalculate every year. If he picks the amortization method, we see that 2% gets him $3,459 and 5% gets him $5,606. In general, people choose the RMD method if they want to commit to the smallest payment possible and can tolerate some variability. Payments must be made at least annually. The selected method determines the annual amount, although the payments can be divided into monthly or quarterly installments if administered correctly. Under the fixed methods, the calculated initial annual amount is intended to remain fixed. Under the required minimum distribution method, it's recalculated each year based on the account balance, thus the variability. If you start with the fixed amortization or annuitization method, the IRS permits a one-time switch to the required minimum distribution method, but not the reverse. You cannot go from RMD to one of the fixed methods. A one-time change to the RMD method can lower future payments, but it's not permission to move freely among the methods or to redesign the arrangement whenever the original amount becomes inconvenient. While there can be complexity in determining the initial amount, this example illustrates a central danger. If the schedule is modified before the required period ends, the IRS can impose the 10% additional tax on the prior payments that had received the exception, plus interest for the earlier tax years. A seemingly small extra withdrawal from a lockdown account can create a very large retroactive bill. A modification can involve more than taking extra money, taking too little, changing the calculation improperly, or altering the account arrangement in a way that changes the payment series can also create problems. Death and disability receive special treatment, but ordinary cash flow surprises do not. This is why many SEPP users isolate it in a separate IRA containing only the assets needed in order to support the payment stream. Other retirement money remains outside that account for emergencies or other planning. The account balance selected at the beginning affects the payment calculation, so deciding how much money to place in the SEPP account is part of the design. It's also possible to have more than one SEPP account at a time. If you're finding this information to be helpful, hit the like button. It helps other people find it, and if you have a suggestion on a topic you'd like to see a video for, drop a note in the comments section. The SEPP arrangement removes the additional 10% tax when the requirements are satisfied, but SEPP does not make the withdrawals income tax-free. Traditional IRA and pre-tax plan distributions are still taxable income. The income can affect tax brackets, ACA subsidies, Social Security taxes, state taxes, and other income-based costs. A SEPP is therefore not an ad hoc spending account. It works best when the retiree has a predictable income gap and enough money outside the arrangement to handle emergencies. It is less attractive when spending is uncertain, the retirement date may change, or if the person expects to need irregular withdrawals. The calculation should also be documented. Keep the account value used, life expectancy tables, interest rate selected, the selected method, payment dates, and annual calculations. The custodian may process the transaction, but the taxpayer remains responsible for showing that the series met the exception. SEPP 72T can be valuable. It can provide access to an IRA many years before 59.5 and may solve a problem that the rule of 55 cannot. But the benefit comes from accepting a fixed amount on a schedule, not from gaining unrestricted access. The decision is not merely whether the annual payment is enough, it is whether you can live with that payment and protect the arrangement for the entire required period. SEPP opens a retirement account early. In exchange, it really does put part of your financial planning on rails.